Versailles, outside Paris. Legacy of the Sun King, and a work of art itself. Every year, the palace offers one of contemporary art's highest profile commissions. The challenge? To install new work in this super bling setting. This year, it's the turn of artist, architect, and design superstar Olafur Eliasson.
I don't think there's any artist in the world who is more globally operating than Olafur.
Everyone can become a queen and a king.
I mean, I think he has actually worked in all 7 continents.
Olafur Eliasson was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, and it's where he still has one of his studios.
This is a nice little sanctuary for me in which I can concentrate. The building itself was a studio for an artist. His name was Willumsen. He was a Danish symbolist painter, and he built it about 120 years ago. And it's very lovely because it has a lot of arts and crafts elements, so everything is handmade.
Although the opening is less than 2 months away, Olafur is still working things out for Versailles.
So this is the plan of the castle Versailles. And it's funny, I carry this plan, so it's like, I have a plan of Versailles with me when I travel now. So it's like, oh, I have to look at that space and so on. So it's kind of funny too. So this space here is the famous mirror hall. I'm trying to convince the conservators that I need a little chunk of their space. They're not being very flexible, but then again, I'm an artist and, you never know, right? So I don't want to do something like a big painting where people stop and pause and they go like, oh, this is probably contemporary art. I want to see if I could almost disappear.
The work that put Olafur on the map was the Weather Project in the Turbine Hall of the Tate Modern in London in 2003. It featured a glowing half-sun that was reflected and completed by a mirror on the ceiling. Smoke and mirrors is one of his specialities.
The Weather Project was, of course, a life-changing show. Not just for Olafur, but also for Tate and Tate Modern. And not just because there were so many people coming through. Actually, we got, I think, an extra million in that 1 year. But what was even more important, I think, that all these people decided to start to do things for themselves and by themselves.
It fundamentally changed the way that people operated in and saw museums. Suddenly, people felt empowered to make political slogans, to have picnics.
And of course, in England, there's this whole thing about the weather being so pivotal to everything. As much as I treasure art and the art world as such, I also understand it can be quite elitist. And this was nice because people, they were not literally patronized by, wow, this is really complicated.
We walked into the Turbine Hall, myself and a friend, and it was filled with this warm orange glow. And you could see the sun at the end of this huge hall, and the floor was covered in people lying down. And we decided to lie down and bask in this glow. I think I spent hours there, and I kept going back. He's really an artist that feels and engages with the environment, and it's something that was very appropriate and very welcoming when Olafur was invited to design a pavilion here at the Serpentine. There's something about his work that goes beyond the technology that's creating these lights and the architecture.
One of the other materials Olafur loves to use is water, probably most spectacularly in the New York Waterfalls of 2008, commissioned by the city's Public Art Fund.
Post 9/11, there was a great spirit of generosity and hope in the city and ideas about what we could do to celebrate the city. And when Mike Bloomberg was mayor and understood the power of art to not only affect one's soul and the way one feels about themselves, but to be a force and economic engine for the city.
New York is such a legendary city. And I said, well, let's go right in there in the industrial, in the roughness, and the kind of what some people would see as wasteland, and let's put in these very beautiful things. And the scaffolds, like this is what you see around the corner in New York all the time. So doing a waterfall from the scaffold immediately would make people only look at the water and they wouldn't see the scaffold, and I was right.
Olafur obviously is deeply committed to the environment. So we had to treat the water. The scaffolding got recycled, the lights got reused. It was all put back. They were solar powered, all renewable energy that we used. Olafur cares about those things.
The Waterfall project was enormously popular. I think they said more than 1 million people went to see and view that work. And it was enormously successful because it was enormously beautiful, but at the same time enormously profound.
There is this magic to hearing and seeing water. You could go to the waterfront and experience something totally different. It was incredible, making something that is natural but wasn't natural.
He takes things which we all take for granted, like, the sun, the clouds, the fraction of light, sun through the clouds, water, rain, and he mixes them, and then he starts to take them apart again. He keeps taking things which he put together apart, and I think that's the true art as well.
Olafur's preoccupation with natural resources partly comes from the time he spent with his father in Iceland, a country of waterfalls, volcanic mud and rock formations. These inspired the hexagonal bricks he made for the facade of the Harper Concert Hall in Reykjavik, which makes the iconic building mirror the natural environment.
It's something that blurs the boundary quite literally between the outside and the inside. There are what are called quasi-bricks, these polyhedral structures, as well as glass skins. So the outside and inside and the blurring of that is conscious.
Olafur blurred the lines between artist and architect again in a piece called Your Rainbow Panorama.
There is this museum in the city of Aarhus in Denmark, where the idea is that maybe the gap or maybe the sort of sequence of paintings or the way you walk through the museum is actually worthwhile pursuing in a more abstract matter.
On one level, it's everything Olafur Eliasson doesn't want to do, which is a monument. It's a monument on a monument. But actually it's not. It's something a lot more than that. It's static, but your experience of it is fluid.
I think it's exciting because when you stand still, you see a color, red. But if I want to change the color, if I want to see something different, I have to move. And in that way, the rainbow is sort of a narrative, or what it really is, it's a kind of an activity generator.
Looking for common themes in Olafur's work, it's impossible to ignore his alternative vision and concern for the environment. Copenhagen is where international artist Olafur Eliasson was born and grew up. He studied at the Royal Danish Academy of Arts, but took time out in New York and Berlin.
Nowadays, it's actually a very good school. It was not so bad back then. The most important thing I learned was the only thing interesting about the art world is art. And that has been my rule ever since.
Ecology, sustainability, natural resources. Copenhagen is a city with an environmental agenda, which both informs and echoes Olafur's concerns.
There's a number of very active priorities in Copenhagen, trying to create a green future, sustainability, bicyclists, walking pedestrians, and I really wanted to also nurture them.
In 2015, Olafur designed the Circle Bridge with its ship-like masts. It's an important link in the cycle and pedestrian routes around the city.
You have a harbour front, which is very long, where people go very fast. And I thought, well, if I do a bridge, besides being functionally relevant to bring people dry from one side to the other, I'll do something which actually slows people down. Almost like the gap between two chairs being more interested than the two chairs.
A lot of the bikers drive like hell in this city. And they really need to sometimes slow down, actually look at your city in a different way. And it's a nice change to many of the structures that we have in this rather sterile harborfront.
But the point is here, making a work of art really gives you confidence in the worthwhile of bringing an idea into action. It's connecting thinking and doing.
Bringing Olafur's ideas into action is what takes place at his main studio in Berlin. It's an extraordinary ideas factory with a whole range of activities spread over 4 floors.
So in the studio now there are 3 teams, and each team is about 30 people or so. There's a team of craftsmen, quite amazing people who work with their hands. There's a team of architects who mainly work on computers, but they make a lot of models too, and they have a training closer to algebraic skills and so on. And then there's a team of more academic people who does research, and this is a kind of ideas lab. This is where I actually try to sit down with people and talk about, well, how do we start things?
Experimentation is very important to us, and I guess when people think of a factory, they would think of a production line, and that's not what we do here. Olafur has a language, of course. He works with mirrors, he works with light, different types of glass, and we continue with these different materials, but it's never just to reproduce something already being made, but to continue the inquiries that we have undertaken.
Yeah, I actually have a lovely little collection of lamps here. You could call it like a bulb cemetery. These are the old people of bulbs. Maybe it's an old people's home, like an old bulb's home. They all work. But of course, as we are going through a number of revolutions in terms of energy, all these old bulbs are dying out. So I just love them so much.
Olafur's concern for the environment has helped put these old bulbs out of business and has inspired a new and innovative light source, a sustainable one, of course.
Little sun. It sounds so small, but it's so far the biggest thing I've worked on because it's a work of art that is really about the whole planet. This is the thing here. You can see it's a little lamp. What it has is a solar panel. So it's a little power station. You sort of hold it in your hand, and then the sun being up there, I could charge it.
He wants to provide an alternative light source that is sustainably priced for Africa. I mean, he's become particularly interested in how a difference can be made there.
I take it out.
It's a small gesture. They're beautiful works of art, editions in and of themselves. The idea is that they're sold broadly in the West to fund a sustainable cost. I think 500,000 of those small suns have now sold.
If a child, I would argue, so grows up with a solar lantern at its bedside, understanding, well, the sun that I harvested today is what I'm using for my good night story. I would argue that child is more likely to choose sustainable energy once that child grows up and has to choose a house.
And I think he is one of those artists who in the next 10, 15, 20 years will look more and more to how art can make a difference.
Meanwhile, in the depths of the Berlin studio, the current preoccupation is with 2 installations for Versailles, with mirrors, holes, and Olafur's distinctive mono-frequency light. But there are still problems to be ironed out.
We've cut everything to size, and yesterday was the first time we've ever seen it put together. It goes out on Thursday next week. What we're trying to figure out, the black box is not so much a problem because everything disappears when you get into the black box, but because we have these mono-frequency lights in here, you see every detail. So we're gonna do a slight white fade around the mirror where it transitions to the wood pieces on the sides and top and bottom. We're also running out of material and time, so we'll see what happens.
We do a lot of experiments that fails. We also treasure the failures. We learn a lot. It's very simple. There's a mirror, and then there's a hole in the mirror, and then there's another mirror behind the mirror. So in the hole, you see a reflection of the hole from the back, essentially with you inside of it. It's kind of becomes a bit hard to tell. Is that a little hanging circular mirror, the one they cut out, which is just hanging further in, or what? So it's kind of nice. It's sort of funny with that. It's funny, you can't really, it's not very selfie friendly, right? Because you can't take a picture of the artwork without you taking the picture of the artwork being inside the picture. It's about time to do not so friendly for selfie type of art. You know, it's interesting because it's an exciting opportunity for me to work at the Versailles, and obviously it's actually an amazing place.
Versailles. From 1682, the home of Louis XIV, the Sun King, and a symbol of autocratic power in France. But since 2008, a place where contemporary artists have been invited to make their statements, including Jeff Koons, Takashi Murakami, and Anish Kapoor. And now, Olafur Eliasson.
I tried to see underneath all of that gold, underneath the mirrors, underneath this incredible power machine, is there a kind of subconsciousness?
If the Sun King was having a list of artists in 2016 to design his palatial retreat, Olafur would be the top in the grand gesture, the Baroque of the 21st century.
I think what we are also celebrating here is, of course, culture. And at the Versailles, I've been very...
At a press conference in the opulent Room of the Crusaders, Olafur speaks to the world's cultural media. He links the works he's created with the palace, its history, and inevitably, the world today.
So Versailles, all of it, is contemporary. And as we know, today is also changing. Last week there was the floods in Paris. Somebody said before this was a natural catastrophe with water. But the truth is, and we don't know for sure, of course, that maybe this was a cultural catastrophe because it was man-made, woman and man-made.
Once again, water is the theme of the works Olafur has created out in the gardens. The centerpiece is one of his waterfalls, taller than anything he created in New York. It's aligned on the axis of symmetry of the garden and was specially designed to obscure the rising sun as viewed from the palace at midsummer.
On dit que le nôtre, qui a créé ces jardins, rêvait d'y faire une cascade. Alors je ne sais pas s'il voulait la faire précisément ici, dans le Grand Canal, ou ailleurs. Alors peut-être que nous lui rendons aussi hommage en faisant une cette année.
The garden is very hierarchically organized. It's about perspective, it's about organization of the senses, and to some extent I'm playing with that. So on one hand, the perspective tries to fool you and says just, oh, the garden is really big, the king is really very, very powerful. But the truth is, water falls with the same speed everywhere. When looking at the waterfall, you can actually see how far away it is. So you can actually scale the garden.
Each of Olafur's garden pieces is about different states of water. Water as liquid in the waterfall, and water as vapour in a piece called Fog Assembly.
The misty weather is full of water. It kind of has a nice Scandinavian touch. We could be in Iceland for that matter. There is a kind of a fog cloud in which you can disappear, where perspective dissolves, right? You can get lost, you can lose yourself. You can lose also who you are if you want.
Olafur's third garden installation refers to ice. But rather than have huge blocks of melting ice as he did for the climate talks in Paris, he's used glacial rock dust from Greenland, which is incredibly fertile and may be important as a fertilizer in our future food supply.
First of all, I think it's incredibly beautiful. It has an amazing color, and clearly this is something very, very alien to some extent, but it's also something very fertile to some other extent. So it's in this amazing colonnade, which is, I think, is one of the most beautiful spaces at Versailles, in which the statue of Persephone stands, which is the goddess of fertility.
The notion that if you want to change the world, you have to change the way people see the world is a well-articulated idea. For him, is if you want to change the world, you have to change the way we experience the world and how we act in the world. Seems to take that idea further.
Olafur describes this clock as Louis XIV's little sun. And he sees beyond the Sun King at Versailles to the way the world has changed in the intervening years.
The truth is, this castle has traveled 300 years to greet us today. My Little Sun project is very much about the decentralization of power, right? So this is a power station. And thinking about Versailles, that's what happened, right? You had a revolution because there's like too much power in one place, and people wouldn't have that.
Olafur uses this monochrome light. It's the same color that he used to create his own sun in the Tate Turbine Hall, and it's all around the works inside. So it seems his language, which involves this yellow sodium sun color, is absolutely built for Versailles.
At first glance, this looks like a sun in a mirror or a solid light source. In fact, it's the mirror boxes we saw in Berlin. With the black hole mirror opposite, they reflect each other infinitely. These boxes are now ghosted into the fabric of the palace. They're an extraordinary source of fascination for those passing through, if they're lucky enough to spot them.
I tried to make works that just became a part of the building. And I already spoken to a few who said, "Oh, was that a work? I walked right by that."
He has seen the Baroque as a distant mirror of our time. He had fulfilled the old rector's dream because he has managed in a very artistic, convincing way to make this visual dialogue in a place that is so powerful. But his own works are here in their own right, and they make a lot of connection to the environment and also to us.
Olafur's visions are always multi-layered. He prefers raising questions to suggesting answers. Questions about the past and the future, hinting that they too are not necessarily separate, but reflections of one another.
If we are sophisticated enough, we should host the fact that this is also contemporary. This is also how the world looks today. And let's see if we could make use of that, considering where do we then go from now? What's the future going to offer us?
He is one of those people that makes you feel that art has a broader role to play than the decorative embellishment of those who can afford it.